Express and give my sincere, deep sincere.
That is no longer a
as there was nothing I could do to take away their pain.
And we can move forward. And the memories of the murder, the trial, and the years spent waiting since Brenda McEllier was taken from this world by Donald Grant. There was a time when there was once doubt that justice would ever be served, and now there is none.
To not leave any live witnesses, correct?
Yes, sir.
Grant's murders were absolutely not impulsive. He planned them out over the course of weeks.
Do the crime, don't do the crime. I know words can't bring them back.
The pain that day was unimaginable, and I was helpless to help those that I loved.
What is it like to know your life is about to end and these are your last moments? Let's watch as an inmate on the row heads to his end. Who was Donald Grant and what did he do? On July 18, 2001, Donald Grant was accused of robbing a La Quinta Inn in Del City, Oklahoma. Two women lost their lives at the time of the robbery: Brenda McEllier, 29, and Felicia Suzette Smith, 43. Donald Grant was 25 years old at the time of the robbery. The women reportedly suffered both gunshot and knife wounds. Grant was arrested after being found in New York by members of a U.S. Marshals task force. "So I'm sitting in the house cleaning my gun with slang on my mind for whoever's ass is there," he wrote in a confession letter at the time. Grant confessed to committing the robbery to bail his girlfriend out of jail. He also admitted to slaying manager Brenda McEllier and Suzette Smith, a front desk clerk, so that there would be no witnesses to his robbery. Grant's attorneys argued that he had severe mental health issues that stemmed from prenatal alcohol exposure and a lack of oxygen during complications at birth. He also had a traumatic childhood growing up in a New York City housing project with a mother who was addicted to crack cocaine and suffered brain damage after being beaten by an alcoholic and abusive father, they said. The attorneys argued the jury that sentenced Grant to his end had received limited evidence of his mental illness and didn't hear from experts about the impact that had on his behavior. The parole board also heard from members of McEllier's family who urged them to deny Grant's request for clemency.
Express and give my sincere, deep sincere.
That is no longer a concern.
As there was nothing I could do to take away their pain. The pain that day was unimaginable, and I was helpless to help those that I loved.
Remorse to what I have done.
And the opinion that he issued. The information that was presented to him in that hearing, concern of mine, based on.
Eventually, Grant was handed his sentence, the capital punishment. His last moments. Oklahoma took the life of Donald Grant for the brutal slayings of two hotel workers during a robbery in 2001. Donald Grant was put to his end by lethal injection after a federal judge denied his request to perish by firing squad. Ahead of his demise, Grant requested a last meal consisting of sesame chicken, egg rolls, shrimp fried rice, and an apple fritter. If there was no dessert, he requested 3 pints of strawberry ice cream. Grant, 46 years old at the time, received a lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester and was declared deceased at 10:16 a.m. It was the first capital punishment in the U.S. in 2022, and the third in Oklahoma since the state resumed lethal injections in October following a nearly 7-year hiatus. A total of 18 witnesses were in the room, including local media, in Grant's final moments. "Yo, God, I got this," Grant said while lying strapped to the gurney, delivering his last words for 2 minutes. "No medication, I didn't take nothing. Brooklyn for life." Grant at one point began chanting unintelligibly. Even after Grant was told his 2 minutes to deliver his last words had ended and the microphone inside the chamber was turned off, Grant continued to speak to about 7 witnesses who attended the punishment on his behalf. A few minutes later, Grant's eyelids began to droop and he appeared to be sleeping. After the doctor entered the room to conduct a consciousness check, rubbing his sternum and calling his name, Grant could be heard snoring as a prison official declared him unconscious at 10:09 p.m. He appeared to stop breathing about 2 minutes later. Cheryl Pilcher, the sister of one of Grant's victims, Brenda McEllier, said her family felt that justice had been served. Although Donald Grant's punishment does not bring Brenda back, it allows us all to finally move forward knowing justice was served, Pilcher said after witnessing his end.
And we can move forward. And the memories of the murder, the trial, since Brenda McEllier was taken from this world by Donald Grant. There was a time when there was once doubt that justice would ever be served, and now there is none. My name is Cheryl Pilcher, and I'm the oldest and only sister of Brenda McAleer. I know he is rejoicing today. Brenda was survived by her siblings, nieces, and nephews. Brenda's father, Walter McAleer's dying wish was for justice to be served, and although he did not live to see it, today marks 20 years, 6 months, 9 days, and just minutes. Although Donald Grant's execution does not bring Brenda back, and the years spent waiting can be replaced with happier memories of Brenda. But today, justice was served. It allows us all to finally move forward knowing that justice was served.
Grant had asked a federal judge to temporarily halt his punishment, arguing that he should be reinstated as a plaintiff in a separate lawsuit challenging Oklahoma's 3-drug lethal injection protocol as presenting a risk of unconstitutional pain and suffering. But both a federal judge and a 3-judge panel of the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver previously denied that request. The U.S. Supreme Court denied Grant's request. The punishment comes after a failed attempt by Grant's attorney to change the method of his punishment. Grant requested the use of a firing squad instead, saying that would be less painful than the injection. He argued Oklahoma's lethal injection protocol would cause unconstitutional pain and suffering, but a federal judge ruled that wasn't reason enough to use a firing squad and denied Grant's request for an emergency stay. Oklahoma inmate Gilbert Postel also requested demise by firing squad and was denied. Several Oklahoma end row inmates with pending punishment dates have sought to delay their punishments after John Grant convulsed on the gurney and vomited after receiving the first dose of midazolam, a sedative, during his October punishment. John Grant's capital punishment was the state's first since problems with the state's lethal injection protocols in 2014 and 2015 led to a de facto moratorium. Richard Glossop was just hours away from being destroyed in September 2015, when prison officials realized they received the wrong lethal drug. It was later learned the same wrong drug had been used to end an inmate in January 2015. The drug mix-ups followed a botched punishment in April 2014, in which inmate Clayton Lockett struggled on a gurney before passing 43 minutes into his lethal injection, and after the state's prisons chief ordered them to stop. Donald Grant's punishment was carried out a month before the start of a federal lawsuit begins challenging the lethal injection drugs as an unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual punishment that makes people feel like they're being burned alive. Grant's last attempts at freedom. During a clemency hearing in November, Donald Grant admitted slaying Brenda McAleer and Felicia Suzette Smith so that there would be no witnesses to his robbery of the Del City Hotel.
To not leave any live witnesses, correct?
Yes, sir.
Grant's murders were absolutely not impulsive. He planned them out over the course of weeks.
Do the crime, don't do the crime. I know words can't bring them back. I'm sorry for my actions. I'm sorry for my actions.
His brain is profoundly damaged.
Them voices that tell you what you shouldn't do and what you should do.
So no one could point you out. You chose.
I understand it.
Court records show both women were shot and knifed, and Smith was also bludgeoned. Prosecutors say both women also begged him to spare their lives before he destroyed them. During one of his last hearings, he expressed deep, sincere remorse and apologized for the slayings, but the state's Pardon and Parole Board voted 4-1 against recommending clemency. Grant said, "I can't change that. If I could, I would, but I can't change that." Two of Donald Grant's attorneys, Susan Otto and Emma Rolls from the Federal Public Defender's Office, argued that he was mentally ill and had suffered brain damage that made him a candidate for mercy. In December, another diagnosed schizophrenic on Oklahoma's end row, Wade Lay, was granted a temporary stay so that a jury can decide if his mental illness allows him to be executed. Although Lay destroyed only one person, another difference is their race. Lay was white and Grant was black. They also discussed Grant's childhood growing up in a New York City housing project during the crack epidemic of the 1980s, a time when he was frequently beaten and members of his family experienced alcoholism, drug addiction, and mental illness. But the board also heard from members of McAleer's family who cheerfully urged them to reject clemency for him. Filcher, McAleer's sister, recalled the pain she experienced when she had to tell their father that her sister was gone. "I had to call my dad and tell him his daughter, his baby girl, was dead," Filcher said. "I had never seen him cry, but that night I heard him weep and it broke my heart." More than 7,000 people signed a petition to halt the punishment. Donald Grant's mental illness and congenital and acquired brain damage were so severe that it took 5 years for Mr. Grant to be stabilized where he could somewhat assist his attorneys in his defense, the petition stated, but to no avail. History of botched lethal injections. Oklahoma planned to put to end 25 prisoners over the 2 years, starting from 2022, despite cries by critics and experts who point not only to outstanding questions of the mental fitness or possible innocence of some, but also the state's recent history of botched lethal injections. Deborah Deno, a Fordham University law professor, said, "It's just yet one more reckless move by Oklahoma. If there was going to be any state that was going to do something so obviously irresponsible and unjust, it would be the state of Oklahoma, given the history." James Coddington was the first scheduled to be punished on August 25. He would have been followed about a month later by Richard Glossop, who had maintained his innocence and got a 60-day stay of his punishment so an appeals court can complete its review of his petition for a new hearing. 23 more men are set to be executed through 2024, and when the punishments are complete, more than half the 43 inmates convicted and sentenced to their end in Oklahoma are due to have been slain. Oklahoma's proposed series of capital punishments follows similar sprees in Arkansas in 2017, and by the U.S. government under the Trump administration. But experts say these undertakings are anomalies, standing in contrast to the continued decline of the final penalty in America in recent years. And carrying out a series of sentences in quick succession could raise the chances of botched punishments. In 2014, Oklahoma Row inmate Clayton Lockett writhed and moaned during his punishment by lethal injection for 43 minutes before suffering a heart attack. Months later, witnesses reported Charles Warner said, "My body is on fire," as he was put to his end in the state. And after a years-long moratorium on the state's penalties spurred in part by the Warner case, John Grant convulsed and vomited on the gurney per witnesses. Yet the penalty carries on, and Donald Grant also ended up being punished by it. That's all for today's video. See you next time.